what I value about the Speakers Bureau. I find it very rewarding, and I actually feel pride when some of the talks that I do actually have an impact on individuals and people in the community. So it's a very important part for me of the speaking activity. You know, as an example, there was an elderly care home who were not willing to take a positive client because they thought that they were unable to service that client's needs. And with Alfred Health, we went and talked to the providers there, and maybe a couple of weeks later, the Alfred came back and said they'd had an email from the client who was settled in to the home and was happy as Larry there. So that for me was a really rewarding experience. It was a really great feedback to get, and I think that's one of the important parts of the Speakers Bureau as well, is that we're not alone out there. You know, we have the support of the Living Positive people who provide the support that we need, and also giving us the kind of feedback that helps us grow as speakers and as individuals in the community. What I've learned is that I have skills that the Speakers Bureau was able to tap, particularly around public speaking, which I've done in the past, but giving that speaking more meaning. I think the kind of speaking I did was academic, and I think the Speakers Bureau is actually about my lived experience, and I find there's a very powerful contract between me as a speaker and quite often those who I'm speaking to, particularly, you know, when we get into questions, and the kind of feedback I get, I find it reflects back on me and my experience and helps me grow to understand how I've become the positive man that I am now. Because previously, as I think I've talked about before, I thought of myself as a guy who was gay and who had HIV. But I've changed that, and part of the Speakers Bureau has empowered me to do that, to think of myself as a positive gay man. So it's kind of reversed my sense of self, and that is really, I think, it's a lot about living positive, being engaged with living positive, but it is very much about the Speakers Bureau, because I love those conversations. I find them so enriching for me, and I find the sort of feedback I get is so positive that I know that what I'm doing actually is having an impact, and people are understanding what it means to be a positive man, particularly for me as a long-term survivor. And some of the stories that I tell about the early years of the pandemic are really revealing, and I find people react in very different ways. For a lot of people, they don't understand just how grueling those early years were, and I think being in the Speakers Bureau allows me to communicate that, and in a sense to commemorate those who went before me, who passed in those harrowing years. And that, I think, is another gift that comes back to me from being part of the Speakers Bureau, to be able to reflect on that and to be able to attest to it in an open and public way. For me, they come more easily because of this, you know, the work that I've done before, you know, as an academic, and doing you know, conferences and things and speaking publicly. But you know, through you, I've been, as I said before, I've been able to find this kind of new place, this new sense of myself, you know, which is very important. What you do, David, is, you know, you don't teach us, you don't tell us what to do. What you do is you equip us with the skills, and you enable us to be ourselves and to tell our story, you know, in a very powerful way. And you know, for that I thank you.